So hey, I'm Thomas. I'm co-founder of Rayquaza. I'm here with Thomas from Linear. It's a similar name, and we also share the passion about developer experience. So quite happy to talk today about how to prioritize the dev experience during development. But before diving into our conversation, why not introducing yourself a little bit more to the audience?
Sure. I'm Thomas. I'm the co-founder of Linear. I used to previously be at Uber. I was a staff engineer on the mobile platform team, looking after developer experience for mobile.
Yeah, seems like a good fit for this chat, right?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. So maybe why in general, like just like developer experience is just a fuzzy term, like, but why should you really care about this stuff? And especially when you're working in a product team, right? It's like sometimes a little bit not the usual kind of thing that you would think about.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what developer experience means to you. Like as a term, it essentially means the experience you have when you develop things,
Yeah.
which means usually that things just go fast and don't go into your way, and you're able to concentrate on just building whatever you're doing. But I think there's multiple layers to developer experience, and I think the important one to realize is that it's really a means to an end. Like you should not focus on developer experience without really realizing why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's good to have fun and be able to engineer in a place where everything feels good and you're able to focus on things. But in the end, it's about building product. The faster you can, the more time you can spend build products, the better the better your developer experience is. To me, means the more time you can spend on building out the product. And maybe as a side product, you get sort of more happy engineers because they can do what they enjoy doing. They don't have to wait for 2-hour builds. Linter will take care of all these awkward discussions about how to format your code,
Yep.
and it feels that the system is there to help you just be a better engineer.
Yeah. No discussion about types of spaces or two spaces or four
Yeah,
spaces.
yeah,
For
that is
example.
for
Yeah.
sure. How,
Yeah.
how do you feel about it?
So I see it kind of as a spectrum. So, I mean, in the ideal world, you want to build a product as quick as possible and without any bugs, right? But the reality,
Mhm.
we all know it's completely different and it isn't that simple. So I see it usually you can spend a lot of time to make something easy to build, which then brings you quicker to your solution. But that maybe also lead to potential bugs. And at the end, that leads to unhappy developers because, I mean, nobody really likes fixing bugs, right? And then the other extreme is you want to make it extremely secure. So you're almost not introducing any bugs or security issues, but that makes it maybe really hard and cumbersome to build, which then also leads to unhappy developers because, I mean, we all want to ship code as quick as possible and get our products in front of the users. So I kind of think about developer experience as a spectrum, and you kind of need to find the sweet spot for the product and for the team. And I think that's different as well because if you work in a finance company, you probably care a lot about security stuff that not suddenly millions of dollars go somewhere missing. But if
Right.
you work on a product team, on a consumer thing, you may be fine with the one or other smaller bug and it's more important for you to outpace your competitor and you pay a little bit more attention on how to make developers faster to get there. And this can change over time, right? So you may be in different phases. Like, okay, we have to go from 0 to 1. So, okay, we find having some issues, but then we change it over time to make it more secure.
Right. That's super interesting that, we have such differing, initial ideas on what developer experience means.
Yeah.
If you could give sort of a concrete example of, you mentioned security, developer experience, making sure that, your application that you're building is secure. Like how, can you give me an example of what that
Yeah.
means? Like what kind of system would ensure that?
Yeah. So at Raycos, for example, we think about when we build something up front, like how much we want to invest into it. Is it something fundamental to the product? Then we invest a lot into it to make it just secure to build that we don't, or that we know no bugs popping up or spend a little bit more time and we know we're building on top of that later. So we want to
Right.
make it easy to build and make sure this is a rock solid thing. Versus there are sometimes this one-off solutions that you're building that thing, but you won't touch it like for the next several months. So you can be a little bit more lax on that and can say, okay, it works like that. I don't need this massive abstractions and being pragmatic in this way to make it like faster to ship this product. And I think that you can see that in various decisions when you do that. And for us, for example, we took early on, we releasing every week. So we want to make it less painful to release every week. Like pretty much you run a script and the update goes out to our users without us being involved. And it wasn't so smooth at the beginning. So we invested into it, especially when we got the bigger team to make it smoother, that this doesn't happen too often and this thing fails. And this is what we do there quite often.
Right.
Yeah.
So
do you have something similar?
Yeah, no, we're really talking about the same thing. Like you're talking, like in the end, everything that matters is sort of friction, being able to not think about things. Like if you have, for example, we have an abstraction on top of our database access in order to make sure that you don't accidentally touch, another workspace's data. And that's a good example of, having a good developer experience around data access, having linters to prevent you from making mistakes, so that literally you can't really make mistakes. You just follow the pattern that is in the application, and if you do something wrong, you'll get notified by the linter that you probably shouldn't be doing this, or if you want to do this, please sort of remove the linter from this file because you're doing something dangerous. In the end, it just takes away the need to look at your code, take a second look at your code in order to make it secure.
Yeah.
You have essentially some sort of automation on top of your code to make things easier to ship.
Yeah, you mentioned the prevention. I think that is actually the key here, right? So you won't prevent that something happens. So either way, we use a ton of linters for this kind of stuff, or also abstractions, like also, as you mentioned with the database, you're building something on top that makes it easier to use, that you prevent a misuse of what otherwise would have been possible. And I think a lot of the times like that. But it also sometimes you have to see the bug first before you're fixing it, right? So we
Sure.
sometimes in the situation you see something up more often, and then we look how we can prevent it, come up with a solution, and then usually applying the solution to the entire code base to also make sure that other passes that maybe use a certain misbehavior getting ironed out over time.
Yeah. There, especially when you go into talking about, what the difference is in developer experience is between startups and then big companies that we've both been part of. I think there's also an aspect that you have to think about, especially when you go into bigger companies. In small companies, developer experience can feel like it's something that should be there, that helps you guide you of not making mistakes. But at big companies where there's so many rules and so many people that have made a mistake that somebody has now a linter in there, it almost feels like policing in some sort of way, and it becomes an annoying thing. So maybe that's a good segue into sort of going into talking about what's the difference between developer experience at big companies versus small companies. How did Facebook do things on that front?
Yeah, so before co-founding Rayquaza, I worked at Facebook as a software engineer. At Facebook, they're quite famous for having like a lot of developer tools. And I think every bigger corporation has this dedicated teams that doing nothing else than improving the speed of development. And so what their engineers are doing, basically, they're looking into building frameworks or even sometimes programming languages to really make a difference in the speed mostly, and then also later on the security layers. And typical examples are like Hack for PHP development, Flow, which there was the attempt to make a TypeScript kind of like thing for JavaScript, and then React is also coming out of that. I was never part of such a team, so I was always on the other side and was enjoying that. So I was enjoying what all the teams came up with. And for me as a developer, it was great because it helped me just shipping things faster and being confident that I do the right thing. And part of that is internal tooling like CLI tools to communicate with the source control, but also then loads of linters that were running all the time. And I think one thing that Facebook did quite well is they value developer experience. So if I as an engineer make other engineers on my team more productive, they value that in performance reviews. So this helped basically everybody thinking about how can I make my team more productive. And for me, that was, I built internal tools to quickly access information. For example, downloading builds quicker that I need to debug, and then my team could use that to be faster. And then basically sharing that with the team. But now when you're in a small company, you obviously don't have such a dedicated team that looks after developer experience, and it's more of shared responsibility. For us, it's a lot more ad hoc. As I mentioned before, we look basically and see where we need to apply a little bit more, where we need to apply a little bit less, where we need to fix something, and then doing that for recurring bugs and thinking how we can prevent certain things. How was that at Uber? Was it like similar, dedicated teams and so on?
Oh, it was, yeah, for sure. Like at some point, you grow so big that you have to have dedicated teams in order to, cover all the ground that other people don't have time for. Because in some respect, like when you get to an organization where you have, like even at Uber, I think we had 20 teams doing mobile work, and all these teams are incentivized, very differently. Like most of them are product teams, so they ship product. They want to make sure that a feature works, and they don't really care too much, or they're not too incentivized to sort of do anything else than
It's a different kind of
build.
developer, right? They're thinking in different problem spaces.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we needed a team that then looked, as we saw it, looked after them, to make sure that they didn't make any mistakes. And we get into the aspect of policing. Like sometimes they really didn't like what we were doing. We saw problems. Like one of the big things that we did on the mobile platform team was to make sure that when you ship the mobile application, it would still work. It is a very different thing than in web development or backend development. Like once you ship it, you can't take it back. It's out there forever. There's always somebody who sort of downloads it from the App Store and never upgrades again. So if you ship something that fully breaks things, you're screwed. Your business can really take a big pounding, because suddenly you have to make sure that everybody upgrades. Well, how do you do that if you don't have something in the system that makes sure that people are forced to upgrade? So much of our work was to make sure that everything is secure and good. And in some respects, like it's both sides of sort of the developer experience coin. Like we make sure that nobody can make mistakes, but at the same time we're sort of enforcing rules down people's throats.
Yeah, you're playing the bad cop in that sense a little bit.
Exactly. So it's a fine line to tread. Once you get there. Then there's obviously things that are much easier to comprehend, like just helping people bring down build times. Like we had a huge dedicated team just focusing on CI, making sure that we intelligently run all the unit tests that needed to run, and all the UI tests that needed to run, and nothing else, so that you could get your pull request landed much faster. Or build out an experimentation system that would automatically turn off features when they started crashing. Helped everybody. People didn't have to be woken up at night. So that's very non-controversial. But it required a dedicated team to go after these initiatives, because the other teams didn't really have the incentives to fix things. Obviously, there were you still had some sort of incentive in sort of the quarterly and half yearly performance reviews, where if you were able to demonstrate that you fixed things for the entire company or all the mobile engineers, you were treated well as well, and you did get appreciation for that. But it was pretty rare that other people sort of took big things to heart and fixed things for many engineers.
Like one thing that is interesting here is like it's all internal developer experience, right? Because I think there's also the separation between internal developer experience versus external developer experience, especially for companies that are providing an API. You suddenly don't need only to think about the developers that you have in the company, but also folks that are outside and building on top of it, which I think is a completely different problem, because you maybe don't even know what they're going to build. So internally, you have a better understanding, I assume, for what people are building and how you can solve them and how you can improve. And you're working basically more closely with your customer in this sense together, right? Was that
Yeah, for
something
sure.
that also help with planning inside of Uber, because you were so close to the people that you're improving, right? They're basically sitting almost next to you.
Yes, sure. Like, you could always go out and ask, what's your biggest problem, and what can I do for you?
Build
And
times
I did,
probably all the
yeah.
time, right?
So we did that. We did send a questionnaire out every quarter, asking, hey, here's problems that we think are important. Like, just rate them. Like, what is your biggest pain point? Like, what is holding you down? What is slowing you down? And after a certain time, like, you didn't have to ask anymore, because you sort of knew, like, the same problems were consistent across, like,
Yeah,
slow build times, UI tests, horribly slow, and literally anything that just made you wait. That's I think the gist of it. Like, if you have to wait for the computer to do something, like, that's the worst developer experience that you can have. If things just go and work out fine without you having to wait for it, you have a good developer experience.
yeah, yeah. There was also this constant push at Facebook to get your changes as quick as possible into production, especially on the web, right,
Hmm.
where this is better possible. And they started with like having, I don't know, daily or weekly cuts where they basically changed the website, but then in the end they trimmed it down to, I think, hourly or something. So everything that
Yeah.
went into this hour was then automated, tested. So if there were regressions, if not, then this thing basically goes out. So literally, by the time you're landing your commit an hour later or so, it is in production, which is all handled by machines that no developer has to care about that, right? So abstracting a
Right.
huge part, which otherwise you would need to go back and see and push and there to make that as seamless as possible.
Which, from a startup's perspective, sounds like a bad thing to have to wait for an hour for your PR to
Exactly.
go out. But I guess once you understand, like, if you have thousands of engineers doing changes with hundreds and hundreds of backend systems sort of working in tandem, being able to ship every hour is quite amazing.
Yeah.
At that scale. But obviously, startups, usually ship continuously. You land something in production, it goes out, and hopefully it's at least a bit tested, before it ships and comes back. But that, sort of the other side of the coin, like, if I compare Uber to startups, like at Uber you have this dedicated team, and in startups you really don't. Like, I think it's everybody's responsibility to make sure that the developer experience is good, and it is. I think it's not really a trade. Like, you shouldn't think of it as a trade-off. Like, I'm trading off my time of building the product into making sure that the developer experience is good. Like, I think it's, again, like, it is the thing that you do in order to be able to build a good product.
Yeah.
You have to figure out, like, what are the things that are holding you up, and if it takes less time to fix it for everybody, than it is to just sort of keep on struggling with the issue, then you should do it. But if not, then probably not at a startup. Like, you're still trying to figure out what you're building, and you're still trying to get to product market fit. So you shouldn't spend time on things that really don't help you with that goal.
Yeah.
But if there's things that slow you down or slow the company down um, more than it takes for you to fix it, then you definitely should.
Yeah. Do you have any specific kind of planning or process at Linear to do that?
Um, I don't think we like, yeah, like, maybe if it becomes too big of an issue, like, when you start getting annoyed by it and you don't have the time
Yeah,
to
like the
fix it.
bigger things, right? Which like need
Exactly.
just longer than just like a couple of hours, but maybe need a week or so to work on
Yeah.
to make it better.
Then you raise it up with everybody else, and sort of try to figure out whether it's a big enough issue to
Yeah,
fix, because, like, you realize that maybe you're burdened by it, but maybe nobody else has the same kind of problem. But at the same time, like, you want to make other people aware of problems that exist with double experience, so that everybody sort of is on the same level with you, and knows what the problems are, and then people can in their minds prioritize, and figure out if they hit the same problem, then they know that it's a bigger thing than
yeah,
just themselves being hit with it.
yeah. One thing that we're doing at Rayquaza, we did twice so far, was kind of like a week long of a bug bash. Like initially more to fix smaller things, but
Hmm.
what also is a good time to just look around, like what were things that you wanted to do for a while, or the code that you wanted to clean up or remove, or the thing that need a little bit more polishing. So that,
Yeah.
I think we do more reoccurrently now, because everybody is happy when you can go back to something and make it a little bit prettier than you left it, right?
Yeah. So we do hack weeks as well, and most of the, well, not most, but 60% of the projects are user facing features that people want to build, but then the rest is developer experience things. So if you're able to give your engineers the time to fix anything and fix whatever, I think they'll find the right balance between shipping some cool features that they always wanted to do, and as opposed to fixing things that have really bugged them in the developer experience. So if you just give them the time, they'll sort of at some point gravitate towards those dev experience things if it's a big enough problem for them.
Yeah, because it affects them directly, right, day to day. So obviously you want to fix the things that are holding you back.
Yeah, for sure. So what's if you had to choose, one thing in your past, half a year that you or your team has fixed for developer experience, what would that be?
Oh,
Like,
good point. Yeah. I named two. So two. One is just this ongoing thing with release automation, which we have. It is simple, but they sometimes fail. So you want to make that smooth because we have this weekly on-call rotation. So once a week, one engineer is responsible to do the release, and it should be as simple as possible. And it works quite well, but then at some point we had to do multiple builds for M1 and all these different architectures that we need to support. So it becomes more flaky because you just need to build more stuff. So we ironed that out and made it easier to use. So for the developer, it's really just running a script, and then it retries automatically and so on and so forth. And I think that helps because it just doesn't hold you back when you're on call, because otherwise you have this one day in the week where you have to cross your fingers and hope that everything goes smoothly, because otherwise your day is ruined by fixing and seeing what the hell is going on the CI. So I think that is a shared thing that helps everybody. Another thing which we dived into initially, and that sounds small, but it's actually huge, and you maybe have seen something similar at Linear, is like handling keyboard shortcuts can actually become really painful when you have different keyboard layouts. So we thought, oh, okay, that's easy, and shipped the first version, and people came back, oh, my keyboard layout doesn't work at all, and then we fixed that, and then the next keyboard layout came. And so we put a lot of effort into this infrastructure because it's just fundamental for our app. It's very keyboard driven. So now a developer shouldn't really care about if the user has a Japanese or an English or a Spanish keyboard. Should just define what they want, which was a big surprise to me that keyboard shortcuts are still so hard to do. And for us, like what is good for us is like we're a very engineering driven team. So even one of our designers coded the initial website. So that means like developer experience is kind of on top of mind of everybody. So there isn't a much big argument around something. Like if you say, okay, I'm going to improve that, everybody would probably stand next to you and say, yeah, that's a great idea. It annoys me less. Sure. Yeah. Did you have something particular in the last couple of months that you would say that's cool to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty normal that people go through the same thing as we did. Like we're obviously a web app. And so we used to have we used to use Parcel as the build system, and it sort of got annoying because we couldn't do hot reloads anymore. Thus, when you ever made a client change, your browser automatically refreshed, and it took like 3 seconds to get back to where you were. Yeah, it's too long. Like for the longest time, it's like it's fine. Like how many changes do you make, or how many times do you have to do that reload? Well, tens of thousands of times, and then it starts adding up. And if you sort of count of how many times you have to reload and how much time you waste, it's actually quite a lot. So we redid our build system, and made pod reloading just super fast. Where when you make code changes, most of the time if you're not very deep in the code, you just get automatic updates in real time for your app, and you can test things.
Yeah, I wish we would have hot reloading on a native app, but we're far away from that technology. Building, but our project is fast enough, so it's kind of fine. It's not a couple of seconds, but yeah, it's kind of fine. Another thing which just popped up for me is like also how we're collaborating with design, because we have a lot of UI. So We put it in initially support for multiple themes and made it easy to build that. Even though we had just one theme, we wanted to have the infrastructure straight there in place, because later it's really painful. And you kind of know at the beginning, yeah, we want to have light and dark themes, so you can think a little bit ahead and can make your life then a lot easier by supporting that. And we did the same with icons and so on, where we have a strict icon and typography system to make it really simple for developers to deal with it.
Perfect, perfect. Again, like, simplicity is the key to a good developer experience. Like, if you don't have to think about it, it's just awesome. I think we have to wrap things up. But maybe as a last question, like, what would be sort of any particular, advice that you would give other startup or early stage companies, regarding developer experience?
Yeah, I think being pragmatic, see where it makes sense to invest and where it doesn't make sense to invest. Think a little bit ahead, which sounds counterproductive or counterintuitive for a startup, but I think you can save yourself a lot of time by investing a little bit further into key elements that you have, and then you can go a long way with that. And then just being ad hoc, things pop up, you fix, you move on. What's kind of your thing before we're wrapping it up entirely?
Just being aware of developer experience, I think, is the biggest thing, because when you know that you should be keeping tabs on how well you're doing on that front, that sort of gives you the insight to check up on it regularly, and figure out whether you should really change it and fix it up. So if you're aware of issues that people have, that makes you prone to fix them when they arise. And it, depending on, if you grow bigger, you probably need to be more systematic about that approach. Like with a team of 10, you can still sort of, talk every week and figure out, what the biggest problems are and fix them as you go along. But if you're, have an engineering team of 20, 30, maybe doing different, back end and front end, and maybe throw in a mobile application as well, you have very, very, different needs from developer experience, and maybe it's good to sort of have a more systematic approach on, asking around every quarter, fill in a spreadsheet what the biggest problems are.
Yeah, scale certainly changed developer experience. Cool, that was nice. That was great. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.